I never thought my marriage would end like this. Not with a fight. Not with a dramatic confession. But with silence. I walked into my house expecting a normal evening. Instead, I found her suitcases packed, her face pale, and a stack of divorce papers waiting on the table. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time I saw real fear. Not because she was caught, but because she finally realized it was too late. She thought she was in control. She thought she could keep lying, sneaking around, fooling me. But what she didn't know was, I had known for weeks. I had planned for this moment. And now she had lost everything. This is the story of how I turned betrayal into the ultimate revenge. And trust me, you won't believe how it ends. What would you do in my situation? Let me know in the comments. And if you love real-life stories of betrayal, karma, and justice, make sure to subscribe because this is just the beginning. I never expected my marriage to end like this. Not with a screaming match. Not with tears. Not with me walking out the door in anger. Instead, it ended in silence, a slow, calculated unraveling that she never saw coming. It all started with a feeling. That gut instinct that something wasn't right. The way she suddenly started spending more time on her phone, the secretive smiles, the late-night girls' nights that left her coming home with barely an explanation. At first, I ignored it. I told myself I was being paranoid. Then, one night, I saw it. She was in the shower and her phone, usually glued to her hand, was left unattended on the dresser. It lit up. A name I didn't recognize. A single message preview flashed across the screen. Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again. My entire world froze. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding in my ears. I could have unlocked it. I could have searched through her messages, scrolled through her photos, pieced together the betrayal right then and there. But I didn't. Because I didn't just want to know. I wanted proof. I wanted to make sure there was no escape, no way for her to twist the truth. So instead, I took a deep breath, walked away, and let the plan begin. The next morning, she kissed me on the cheek before heading off to work. I smiled, told her to have a great day, and watched as she left, completely unaware that I had already made the first move. I took the day off from work. Instead of going to the office, I went straight to the bank. Step 1. Cut off her access to my money. Since the majority of our accounts were in my name, it was easy to move everything to a private account, one she had no access to. I kept just enough in our shared account so she wouldn't suspect anything. Next, I called the credit card company. Step 2. Remove her from every credit card. She had always relied on my finances. She never had to worry about paying the bills or keeping track of spending. That was about to change. By lunchtime, she had no idea that her financial safety net was already gone. That evening, she came home like nothing was wrong. She tossed her purse on the counter, smiled, and asked if I wanted to order takeout. I looked at her. Really looked at her. She had no idea what was coming. I played along. Sure, I said. Let's get something nice. She handed me her phone. You pick. I need to take a quick shower. I took the phone, pretending to scroll through menus. But instead, I opened her recent messages. And there it was. Flirty texts. Plans to meet again. Photos. I locked the phone and placed it back on the table before she came back. She leaned over and kissed me on the forehead. What are you in the mood for? I smiled. Oh, I already know what I want. She had no idea I wasn't talking about dinner. Over the next week, I gathered every piece of evidence I needed. I got access to our phone records, tracked her location history, even placed a small GPS tracker in her car. She was sloppy. Careless. Maybe she thought I would never suspect anything. Maybe she thought I was too trusting, too comfortable. She was wrong. By Friday, I had everything. And that's when I made the final move. Step 3. Give her a reality check. That afternoon, I packed her things into boxes. Every item she owned. Her clothes, her shoes, the expensive gifts I had bought her over the years. I stacked them neatly by the front door. Then, I called the bank one final time. Step 4. Cancel every credit card she had. The moment she tried to swipe one, she'd realize something was wrong. Finally, I printed out a copy of her messages. Every text she sent him. Every lie she had told me. I placed the papers on top of the boxes. Then I sat on the couch and waited. She walked through the door at 7 p.m., smiling like nothing was wrong. She tossed her keys onto the counter, slipped off her shoes, and froze. Her eyes flicked to the boxes by the door. She looked at me. What's going on? I didn't answer. She stepped closer, reaching for the papers on top of the boxes. As she scanned the messages, her own words staring back at her, I saw it. The moment she knew it was over. Her face drained of color. Her hands trembled. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. I leaned back, crossing my arms. Anything you want to say? She swallowed hard, blinking rapidly like she could somehow make this all disappear. I can explain, she stammered. I smiled. I'm sure you can. But it won't change anything. Her breathing turned shallow. I made a mistake. No, I said calmly. You made a choice. She turned, reaching for her purse. I need to go outside for a second. Sure, I said, nodding toward the door. But you won't get far. She frowned. What? Try using your credit cards. Her fingers hovered over her bag. I saw the hesitation, the first flicker of panic in her eyes. She pulled out her phone. Her fingers moved quickly, tapping on her banking app. And then her entire face collapsed. She tried another app. Then another. All accounts, frozen. Every card, declined. She turned to me, her voice barely above a whisper. What did you do? I leaned forward. You wanted freedom, didn't you? Well, now you have it. Just not the kind you were expecting. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. She was trapped. The reality was sinking in fast. She had lost everything in a single night. I stood up, grabbed my jacket, and walked toward the door. Where are you going? She asked, voice shaking. I looked back at her one last time. I don't know, I said. But wherever it is, it'll be better than here. I opened the door, walked out, and didn't look back. I drove away without looking back, knowing that behind me, she was standing in the doorway, her world crumbling around her. But this wasn't just about punishing her. This was about taking control of my own life again. No more lies. No more manipulation. No more playing the role of the clueless, trusting husband. She had made her choices, and now, for the first time in a long time, I was making mine. I didn't go far. Just to a small hotel across town where I had booked a room for the weekend. Not because I had nowhere else to go, but because I didn't want to be around when she fully realized the weight of what had happened. I wanted her to sit in that house, surrounded by those boxes, knowing that everything she had taken for granted was gone. I wanted her to go through the 5 stages of grief, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, before she finally reached acceptance. The night was quiet, but my mind wasn't. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment over and over again. The late-night texts she thought I didn't see. The whispers on the phone. The way she used to smile at me but hadn't in months. I had been sleeping next to a stranger and I never even realized it. But now? Now she was the one lying awake, not knowing what would come next. The next morning I got up early. I checked my phone. No missed calls. No frantic messages. Strange. I had expected her to blow up my phone with 1,000 texts, trying to talk her way out of this. But instead? Silence. I had a feeling she was still trying to figure out her next move. Or maybe she was waiting for me to break first, to come crawling back, to give her an opening where she could try to manipulate me again. It wasn't going to happen. Instead, I got dressed, grabbed some coffee from the lobby, and made my next move. Step 1. Call my lawyer. I had already set up an appointment earlier in the week, so by the time I walked into the office, everything was ready. The divorce papers were drafted. My financials were in order. The house? It was mine. She had no legal claim to it, thanks to the prenup she conveniently forgot existed. Sitting across from my lawyer, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. She's not going to take this well, I said, signing the last page. She doesn't have to, my lawyer replied. She just has to take it. Step 2. Serve her the papers. I had them delivered straight to the house that afternoon. I wasn't going to be there to see it, but I could imagine her reaction. The disbelief. The panic. The slow realization that she wasn't just losing her husband, she was losing everything. I could picture her pacing the living room, calling her lover, looking for reassurance. Maybe he would comfort her. Maybe he would tell her everything would be okay. But I knew the truth. He wasn't looking for commitment. He was looking for fun. And now that fun had just turned into something messy, something he wasn't prepared for. She was about to learn the hard way that men like him never stick around when things get complicated. Step 3. Cut all contact. I changed my number. Blocked her on everything. She had no way to reach me. She could scream, she could cry, she could beg, but it wouldn't matter. I was done. Later that evening, while sitting in my hotel room, I got a message from an unknown number. Unknown. We need to talk. Please. I didn't even have to guess who it was. I stared at the message for a few seconds, then did what I should have done a long time ago. I deleted it. By the time the weekend was over, I was ready to face whatever came next. I had already arranged for the locks to be changed first thing Monday morning. Anything of hers that was still in the house? It would be gone by the end of the week. She had no home. No money. No safety net. For the first time in her life, she was about to experience what it felt like to be truly alone. And somehow I didn't feel sorry for her at all. I woke up Monday morning feeling lighter than I had in years. The weight of the past few months had lifted, and for the first time in a long time, I felt in control. No more secrets. No more lies. No more waking up next to someone who was pretending to love me while sneaking around behind my back. Today was the day I would finish what I started. By the time she woke up, she would realize she was truly alone. No access to money. No credit cards. No place to go. I checked my phone. No messages. No missed calls. It wasn't surprising. I knew she was still trying to figure out how to handle this. Trying to convince herself that this was fixable. That if she just said the right words, if she played the victim hard enough, I'd cave. She didn't know me at all. By noon, my lawyer confirmed the divorce papers had been delivered. She had signed for them, meaning she had seen the reality in black and white. I imagined her hands trembling as she opened the envelope, scanning the documents, realizing that everything she had taken for granted was being ripped away. Her car? Leased in my name. I had already revoked her access. Her credit cards? All closed. Her joint bank account? Emptied. The only thing she had left was whatever cash was in her purse, and I doubted that was much. I waited for the explosion. The anger. The outrage. It didn't come. Instead, around 3 p.m. I got a message from her best friend. She's at my place. She's a mess. Says she wants to talk to you. What do you want me to tell her? I smirked. Of course, she had gone running to her friend. Crocodile tears, sob stories, playing the victim. I replied simply, tell her there's nothing left to talk about. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. It was her. I let it ring. Then another text popped up. I know you hate me right now. I deserve it. But please, just meet me. One conversation. That's all I'm asking. I stared at the message, debating whether I should even acknowledge it. I wasn't interested in hearing her excuses. But I was curious. So I sent a final message. Meet me at the house. 1 hour. After that, I never want to hear from you again. She replied instantly. Okay. I'll be there. I arrived first. The house was quiet, empty. Exactly how I wanted it to be. The locks had been changed and every trace of her presence had been wiped away. By the time she pulled into the driveway, I was waiting at the door. Her hair was a mess, her face puffy from crying. She had the look of someone who finally realized how badly they had screwed up. She stepped out of the car hesitantly, her eyes scanning my face for any sign of weakness. Can we go inside and talk? She asked softly. I shook my head. No. You don't live here anymore. Her eyes flickered with something, pain, maybe. Or just the realization that this was real. I messed up, she admitted, her voice trembling. I know that. But can we just talk? Please? I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe. Talk about what? About how you lied to me. How you snuck around behind my back while pretending to be my wife. She flinched but didn't break eye contact. I never wanted to hurt you. I laughed. That's funny, considering you did everything in your power to do just that. She bit her lip, shifting on her feet. I made a mistake. A mistake. I repeated, my tone sharp. A mistake is forgetting to take the trash out. A mistake is leaving the oven on. What you did was a choice. She swallowed hard. I didn't think it would go this far. I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. That's the problem. You never thought. You never thought about me. You never thought about what this would do to us. You only thought about yourself. She took a shaky breath. I don't know how to fix this. I stared at her, completely unfazed. You can't. Silence. For the first time since this started, I saw real fear in her eyes. So what now? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. I pulled the divorce papers from my pocket and tossed them onto the hood of her car. You sign those. Then you figure out how to live without me. Her hands trembled as she reached for them, flipping through the pages, scanning the terms. You're really doing this, she murmured. I already did, I said simply. Her lips parted as if she wanted to argue, but then she saw the truth written all over my face. This wasn't a fight. This was over. Tears welled in her eyes, and for a brief moment I thought she might drop to her knees and beg. But instead, she sniffled, gripping the papers like they might crumble in her hands. Where am I supposed to go? She asked, her voice cracking. I shrugged. Not my problem. She let out a small, choked laugh, shaking her head in disbelief. You really don't care anymore, do you? I tilted my head. Why would I? She wiped her face with the sleeve of her sweater, taking one last look at the house, our house. But it wasn't hers anymore. It never would be again. She exhaled shakily, stepping backward toward her car. I loved you, you know. I smirked. Not enough. She nodded slowly, defeated. Then, without another word, she got into her car and drove away. I watched until her taillights disappeared down the street. Then I turned back toward the house, stepped inside, and closed the door on that chapter of my life for good. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled. I stood at the doorway for a moment, letting the silence settle in. She was gone. The storm had passed, and I was left standing in the wreckage of what had once been our life together. But for the first time, it didn't feel like a loss. It felt like freedom. I stepped inside and locked the door behind me, leaning against it for a second, inhaling deeply. No more lies. No more deceit. No more waking up every morning wondering if today would be the day I finally found out the truth. I had found out. I had faced it. And now I had won. I walked through the house, glancing at the now empty spaces where her things used to be. The spot by the door where she'd kick off her shoes. The bathroom counter that used to be cluttered with her endless supply of makeup and skincare products. The couch where she would curl up and pretend like she was exhausted from work when in reality she had spent the day in another man's bed. That life was over now? I grabbed a beer from the fridge, sank onto the couch, and let my mind wander. What was she doing now? Sitting in her car, trying to figure out where to go? Crying to her friends, telling them a twisted version of the story where she was the victim? Maybe she was calling him her precious backup plan, only to realize that men like him never stick around when things get messy. She had lost everything in a single night. A part of me had expected to feel something: guilt, maybe. Regret. A sense of loss. But as I sat there, sipping my drink, listening to the sound of the empty house, I felt nothing but relief. And just as I was starting to enjoy the quiet, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. Her lover's wife. I smirked before answering. Hey. She let out a breath. Well, he finally came home. I chuckled. How did that go? She gave a humorless laugh. Exactly how we expected. At first, he acted like he didn't know why I was mad. Then, when I showed him the evidence, he tried to flip it on me, said I was invading his privacy, that I was ruining our marriage over nothing. I rolled my eyes. Classic. I served him the papers, she continued. Told him he had 2 days to pack his things and leave. How did he take it? She exhaled. About as well as you'd imagine. Shouting, cursing, saying I'll never find someone better. She paused for a moment before adding, then he called her. That made me sit up straighter. And? She chuckled darkly. She didn't answer. I laughed. Guess she finally realized he's not worth it. Guess so. There was a pause before she spoke again, this time softer. You okay? I considered that for a moment. Was I okay? I thought back to everything that had happened over the past few days. The betrayal. The lies. The unraveling of what I had once believed was a solid marriage. And yet I had never felt more at peace. Yeah, I said. I really am. She let out a small laugh. Good. Me too. We talked for a little while longer, sharing the ridiculous things our exes had tried to say in their own defense. It was strange how easy the conversation felt, like two people who had been through the same war and come out on the other side. By the time we hung up, I was still smiling. The next day, I got the final confirmation that this was truly over. My lawyer called to tell me that she had signed the divorce papers. No fight, no last-minute attempt to argue the terms. She just signed them and walked away. It was done. I went to the house one last time that evening just to make sure everything was in place. The locks had already been changed. Her name was officially off everything: the house, the bills, even the car she once drove. There was no way for her to come crawling back, even if she wanted to. I was wiping away the last traces of her existence in my life. And then, just as I was about to leave, my phone buzzed again. A message from her. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. But curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. I signed the papers. I guess this is it. I never thought we'd end up like this. I miss you. I hope you'll be happy even if it's not with me. I stared at the message, debating whether or not to respond. Part of me wanted to tell her the truth, that I had been unhappy for a long time. That she had made her choices and now she had to live with them. That she didn't miss me, she missed the life I had given her, the comfort, the stability. Instead, I simply typed back, "Take care." And then, without hesitation, I deleted the conversation and blocked her number. This was my life now. I stepped outside, inhaling the cool evening air, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I was finally free. I woke up the next morning feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. No tension in my chest, no gnawing anxiety, no endless questions running through my head. It was over. The betrayal, the deception, the constant unease I hadn't even realized I'd been living with, it was all gone. I took my time getting up, letting the quiet settle around me. The bed felt different without her there, but not in the way you'd expect. It wasn't empty. It was mine again. For the first time in years, I felt like I owned my own life. I made coffee, sat by the window, and checked my phone. Nothing from her, of course, she was blocked. But I had a message from her former lover's wife. He moved out. Finally. Thanks for everything. I think I needed to see just how low he would sink before I could let go. Let's grab a drink sometime. I think we deserve it. I chuckled to myself. We really did. I replied, sounds like a plan. I put my phone down and leaned back, letting the moment sink in. I had made it through the storm. Later that afternoon, I went back to the house one final time to take care of the last remaining loose ends. It didn't even feel like our home anymore. I had already made arrangements to sell it. Too many memories. Too much history. I wanted a fresh start, somewhere she had never set foot, somewhere that didn't carry the weight of her betrayal. I walked through the rooms, making sure I hadn't left anything behind. The house was eerily quiet. No scent of her perfume lingering in the air. No traces of her things scattered around. She was gone. And yet, I knew she wasn't done trying. Because just as I was locking the front door, a familiar car pulled up to the curb. Her car. I sighed, already exhausted before she even stepped out. She hesitated, gripping the car door like she was debating whether or not to actually get out. But eventually she did. She looked different, not the confident, manipulative woman who had spent months lying to my face. No, she looked tired. Worn down. Like she had finally accepted that she had lost. She took a slow step forward. I know I'm not supposed to be here. I didn't say anything. Just crossed my arms, waiting. I just wanted to see you one last time. I exhaled through my nose. Why? She swallowed hard. Because I don't want to end things like this. I scoffed. Like what? With consequences? Her jaw tightened. With hate. I tilted my head. You think I hate you? She hesitated. Don't you? I shook my head. No. I don't hate you. I just don't care anymore. That seemed to hit her harder than anything else I could have said. She looked down at her hands, twisting her fingers together. I thought we were forever. I almost laughed at the irony. Yeah? You sure didn't act like it. She flinched. I don't expect you to forgive me. Good. I don't know who I am without you. That made me pause for a moment. Because for so long I hadn't known who I was without her either. She had been part of my life for years. But the difference was I had found myself again. And she was just now realizing that she had lost everything. I met her gaze. Then maybe you should figure that out. She blinked rapidly like she was trying to hold back tears. I don't know how to. I shrugged. Not my problem. She let out a shaky breath. I really did love you, you know. I studied her for a long moment before answering. No, you didn't. You loved what I gave you. You loved the security. The stability. But me? You threw me away the second you got bored. She opened her mouth to argue but stopped herself. Because she knew I was right. A car honked from down the street and she glanced over her shoulder. I followed her gaze and spotted an unfamiliar vehicle parked a few houses down. My smirk returned. Your new backup plan? She let out a breath, looking at the ground. I took a step back toward the house. You should go. He's waiting. She turned to me one last time. I really am sorry. I nodded once. So am I. She hesitated like she wanted to say something else, but then she just turned, walked back to her car, and drove off. This time I didn't watch her go. Because I was already looking ahead. I sold the house within a month. Bought a new place across town, somewhere she had never been, somewhere that didn't carry the ghosts of our past. I took my time rebuilding my life, focusing on myself for the first time in years. I worked out more. Spent time with old friends I had neglected. Dated casually, but nothing serious. And then, one night, I got a text. From her lover's ex-wife. Still owe you that drink. I smirked down at my phone before replying. Yeah, you do. We met up later that week just for a casual drink. No expectations. No pressure. Just two people who had been through the same hell and come out stronger. And for the first time in years, as I sat across from someone who actually respected me, I felt something new. Hope. Because this was just the beginning.